The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Welcome. We'll get started in just a couple minutes here. Hi there. Good afternoon and welcome to this webinar hosted by the Outdoor Industry Association. My name is Colleen Grass. I'm a regional director for Centric Software. And in today's webinar, I'll be speaking with Luke Boswell of Mystery Ranch, and we'll be unpacking how Mystery Ranch maintains quality standards during market disruption. Thanks for joining me today, Luke. Are you there?
Yep, I'm here. Thanks, Colleen.
Awesome. Okay, cool. Well, so before we get started, I just wanted to throw out a few housekeeping items. We hope that you can, of course, listen to the entire conversation, but if for whatever reason you need to run to another meeting or what have you, please be aware that a recording will be available of this webinar, and that will be available within the next 24 hours and will be mailed out to all the participants. Additionally, I want to encourage you guys to submit questions as you have them throughout the presentation, and we'll do our best to answer those, if not during, then at the end. and just make sure that you direct it to the presenters in the chat feature of the webinar box that you should have up on the right-hand side of your screen. So today I'm just going to take a couple of minutes to give you a quick overview of Centric Software and sort of why that's relevant, and then we'll dive into who Mystery Ranch is, what it means to be a brand that's committed to the highest quality standards, how really to build the foundation for growth and the benefits and ROI of a systems-based approach to quality standards. And so kind of I thought before we get started, I wanted to see if I could ask to give a little bit of background on yourself, Luke. Thank you so much for joining. I know you've been with Mystery Ranch for about 5 years, and before that you were with Sims Fishing Products. So can you tell us a little bit about what brought you to Mystery Ranch?
Yeah, I've been kind of in and around manufacturing and product development most of my career, and always wanted to kind of be in the outdoor industry. And so, Mystery Ranch for me is a great place to work, and a great company in that we're dedicated to kind of the highest level of quality, and just innovative product development. So it's fun to kind of be not only involved on the outdoor side of things, but also to get to kind of delve in a little bit to some of our other business channels, which I think we'll talk about here in a minute. But we're involved in a lot of industrial end use stuff as well as recreational end use. So it's a good mixture of a bunch of different types of businesses.
Awesome. So funny story for our audience, I actually met your team at Outdoor Retailer about 3 years ago. And upon introducing myself to, I'm pretty sure it was Alex, your VP of sales, sort of before I could even finish my introduction, he interrupted me to say, well, can you integrate with our ERP? Because if you can't, then we're probably not interested. So, I think at that point, it was obvious to me that clearly your team was sort of facing some challenges, just in the area overall in terms of managing your processes and your documentation. And that was the catalyst in the beginning of the relationship between Mystery Ranch and Centric Software. So before we delve into everything, I wanted to just give a quick overview of who Centric Software is, and just to kind of give you everyone listening a little bit of background, and then we'll get a little bit further into talking about sort of what the business is all about. So just really, when you think about where people are at in today's world and how they're dealing as a brand or as a company, dealing with how they're managing the product development process, starting all the way at the beginning of design through and to production, there's a lot that goes into that. And when you're trying to maintain sort of being a quality product, obviously there's a lot that goes into managing all of those, the documentation, all of the testing and things which we're going to get into. But really, just kind of starting with that obvious point, it's a bit of controlled chaos. And what I've found over the years is that really brands kind of reach a tipping point where either they already have a system or they're kind of like stuck in this chaos of spreadsheets. And that ultimately is sort of ending up dealing with, mistakes, delays, too much time spent sifting through, finding information. And then really at the end of the day, there's not really a way to kind of make meaningful sense of the data and apply that back to your business. So, just to give a little bit of background on, who Centric Software is, we're a product lifecycle management company. We've been around for the better part of, 15 plus years. And really, when you think about, just to give a little idea of where and how PLM has evolved and how Centric Software came into the mix, in its infant stages, it really began decades ago, going back to the 80s when there was CAD and Adobe and Illustrator. And, thanks to Apple, you saw digital technology become available to the masses. And so you started seeing designers working in digital tools beyond, just sketch pads. And this really began the need to be able to house and store all of those documents. So you saw sort of PDM that was really just a central repository for documentation. And then, with traditional PLM in the automotive and the aerospace world, where things took a long time to develop, you saw that they were cumbersome, and it was just really difficult for brands. When you talk about retail, when you talk about multiple seasons, you talk about hundreds, if not thousands of SKUs, that it doesn't work in those old time systems. So, 15 years ago, Chris Groves, our CEO, assembled a team really of highly skilled individuals to kind of solve these inherent problems that were associated with the traditional PLM. And that's where Centric kind of really, kind of began to shine, and has now become recognized as a PLM leader in multi-category, and including, fashion, hard goods, soft goods, retail, luxury, fast consumer goods, and we're expanding beyond. So as we've grown, this is a shot of our logo slide. You guys have been with us for a couple of years now, and I think that when we initially spoke, knowing that we had experience in your industry and had been developing our system based on feedback that we've gathered over a decade of getting all of that back from our customers, it's really helped us to develop our future roadmap. And so with every revision of the software, our PLM offering becomes better, more robust. And now you can see with, merchandise planning, trend inspiration, collections, deeper integration into, working with factories and different technologies that brands are connected to, and now moving into 3D. Our mantra just really has been to assemble the best team, the best solutions, find the best customers, and then of course make those customers the happiest. And so I think that's really what has allowed us to be trusted by some of the biggest brands in the world. And furthermore, by partnering with these companies, it's just really enabled us to continue to improve the product over time. So sort of with that being said, I'm really excited, obviously, to be talking to you guys today, and just really have had the pleasure of working with you over the last couple of years, and being able to take information from what you guys are doing, and how you're working with your own customers, and then being able to provide that as feedback. And obviously we look to continue that relationship for a long time to come. So I would say that we're definitely aligned in terms of our mantra, and that, Mystery Ranch, you guys also build packs that are made, as you say, to do the job so that the customers can do their job, right? And so with knowing that you're working with some of the best materials, that, putting things together in the most durable way of construction, with that focus on feedback and testing, innovation really is also at the core of everything that you do. So I'd like for you to just, give us a little bit of overview beyond what, I've mentioned, and really kind of tell us how Mystery Ranch got started, and some background on the company, and then we'll delve in.
Yeah, so as you can see here, Dana and Renee founded the company in 2000. That was, this is not their first backpack company, obviously. They owned a company called Dana Designs in the 80s and 90s, and then also worked together previously on a few other pack companies dating back to the 70s. So they've been in the game for a long time, and the idea with Mystery Ranch, I think, at its outset, was to get back involved into the outdoor space, which they had kind of been firmly rooted in with Dana Design. But then quickly, we started getting customers coming to us with new and interesting problems. And so at first that was, U.S. Special Forces, and in the early 2000s, we kind of made a pivot to focus more on military production. And that was twofold. I think, we, at the time, the company, we were doing all of our own in-house manufacturing. And so it made a lot of sense in terms of Berry compliance, which is, essentially the U.S. government requires military products to be made in the USA wherever possible. But also too, it was a really cool user group who, has interesting problems that need to be solved. And so that was kind of our wheelhouse. And then later in the 2000s, we got into wildland firefighting packs, again, just based on users calling us up and saying that they didn't have what they needed to do their jobs effectively, and wanted us to kind of help troubleshoot solutions. And that's kind of really how we've gotten into the different markets that we're in today. is that, you know, we kind of get pulled into different problem sets and find kind of interesting solutions, and then it kind of grows from there. And so today where we're at is we still do military. Obviously, we do wild and firefighting stuff, and we do hunting as well as outdoor. So what's interesting for us is that, you know, our business is beautifully simple in the fact that we have one product category and we can really focus and excel kind of in a certain product subset. But we also, it's complicated by the fact that, you know, we have all these different sales channels which need to be serviced in their own particular way. It also requires different supply chain dynamics. As I mentioned, you know, we have to have a pretty robust U.S. supply chain, not only for manufacturing, sewing manufacturing, but also materials. On the fire side, you know, we certify products to an NFPA 1977 standard, which is through UL. And so there's a very rigorous kind of material supply chain there that has to be adhered to. And then obviously on the outdoor side, you know, we've recently kind of explored more Asian manufacturing and worked with, you know, those material supply chains as well in order to produce products, you know, at a palatable price point for the U.S. market. So that kind of diversification, I think, you know, makes our business unique in some senses, and it's really helped us, particularly in a time like this. You know, the market diversification that we have is such that it really allows us to balance our portfolio, meaning that, you know, if there are consumer disruptions or disruptions to the consumer market, oftentimes we've found that we're able to kind of make up those shortfalls through the other procurement channels that we deal with. So as I said, it's a really fun and dynamic business in the sense that you know, we get to solve cool problems. We have really close connection to our customers on all channels, and so that's kind of the best part about it, I guess, is we just have a real tangible access to the people that we're solving problems for, and get to work closely with them to innovate new and cool ideas.
Yeah, and so like, tell me, I don't know that I've ever even asked you this question. Like you said, you kind of got started when Special Forces reached out. Like, how did that conversation go? Was it something where it was like, hey, we've seen your packs, or some of our guys use them out when they're hunting? Like, tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, well, so I think that there were, you know, at the time, there were a lot of guys in Special Forces, and there continue to be, who are pretty, you know, in their personal lives, they're pretty avid, you know, outdoorists. And so having used Dana packs, you know, there was a name recognition there for sure. And also I think just, you know, there's a certain empathy, I guess, that comes along with what we do. And so people pick up on that. And so I think, as I said before, you know, we kind of get pulled into these things, and it really, what happened was that, you know, we were approached by groups of Special Forces people who you know, had used Dana packs and really were just looking for something better in terms of what they were being issued. And so it all kind of, you know, started from there. And there's a funny story where there was we had a pack at the time, which was kind of the first iteration of our 3-zip, which is called the Sweet Pea, which is a kind of local name for here in Bozeman. You know, the Gallatin Valley used to be a big kind of agricultural area for sweet peas, and there's a festival here in the summer called the Sweet Pea Festival. And so Dana had named this pack the Sweet Pea, and then some SF procurement guy came in, you know, to the shop and was kind of like, oh, this is awesome. This is like a perfect assault pack if you just make a couple of these modifications. What's it called? And he's like, oh, it's called the Sweet Pea. And the guy like looked sternly over and was like, I'm not sending my boys to the sandbox with a bag called the Sweet Pea. So that inevitably became the 3-day assault, which is still to this day one of our better selling packs. But yeah, it's really that process of like working with the right people who have good ideas and who understand the needs of what their mission is, and then trying to kind of prototype and iterate and tailor those products to what they're needing. And you know, now it's snowballed into. We've done just some really cool projects. Most recently, we've done a lot of work on an Arctic pack, which is obviously with climate change and the opening up of the Arctic. There's activity, I guess you could say, in those regions, and so we've been working with an ambassador of ours named John Houston, who's an Arctic explorer, and also different special forces groups to kind of tailor needs to Arctic expeditions. And so we've built a frame around that's able to pull ski sleds or ski polk sleds. And also we have to do kind of pretty interesting and extensive testing on how the materials can stand up to negative 35-degree temperatures and things like that. So that's really kind of what keeps us going and keeps us interested in in what we're doing is just that tangible connection to the customer.
Yeah, and so let's talk about that a little bit, because obviously going from anything from all the way an Arctic perspective where you've got negative degrees versus something where you're talking about the folks that are fighting fires on the front lines, you do your own in-house testing. And I think that there are a lot of hard good brands that do that, but there's not a lot of people that probably aren't too familiar with that. So let's talk a little bit about how you guys do your in-house testing. I know you've always sort of touted that you initially took that approach of a DIY sort of approach where all of your folks in-house, in terms of your designers, in terms of your product developers, all have access to sewing machines. They have access to pattern cutting tools, and really delving into, hands-on. When you talk about fabrics and the technical fabrics and things that you're working with, and you're talking to folks, whether it's someone who's exploring the Arctic versus someone who's special forces or fighting fires, how do you take that feedback and how are you applying it back into the product development process?
Yeah, that you bring up a good point, and I think that Dana and Renee have built just an amazing foundation for us as product people, and allowing us to kind of do things ourselves, and so that's a really important tenet of ours, I guess, is we want and we still have in-house manufacturing as well, and so we want to be able to at the end of the day produce whatever it is that we're selling on our own if needed. Obviously we don't do that for the majority of our products, but we have that capability, and as a result in product development we want to prototype on our own first. That provides a lot of benefit for a number of reasons. One is we have an intimate familiarity with the product before it goes out the door. We've worked with it from a hands-on perspective. We've tested it ourselves, and it also just kind of downstream of us too when it comes to our QA/QC kind of procedures, as well as just manufacturing and supply chain. Like when anything comes up, we just understand the products so much better because we have that hands-on approach. And so yeah, I guess in terms of your question, in terms of testing, it's been an ongoing evolution. We used to just come up with crazy ways to validate materials, whether it was taking a buckle and sticking it under a chair, and kind of seeing how it performed against whatever else we were using, to now where we've kind of evolved to we've basically built an entire testing lab, where we not only are performing ASTM tests on materials to benchmark them against other materials that we used, but we also have started to build kind of our own in-house kind of testing methods that are much more specific to the product's end use. So in the case of like Arctic stuff, that's an interesting test case where, okay, we got to build a cold chamber and figure out, how a foam performs at negative 40 degrees, or we work with jump packs, for example. We use certified thread and webbing in order for our packs to be jumpable for kind of parachute missions. And so, getting basically a bunch of lead and, throwing it off the roof and from a string and kind of seeing how it works. I think really the process from testing has evolved such that we're actually collecting a lot of data now, and analyzing that data prior to kind of qualifying those materials. So it kind of goes both ways. It's both both a field testing kind of, our in-house prototyping capabilities allow us to field test stuff either on our own or to quickly get it into the customer's hands for them to field test and then provide feedback. So that process is just is really quick for us, and allows us to kind of be more responsive and more adaptive to kind of what the customer needs are. And then, really, as I said before, like now we've just gotten a little bit more organized about the data collection and the methodology behind the data, and how we document that. So, still ongoing evolution. We're constantly kind of trying to figure out new ways to test things in order to get ahead of the curve when it comes to longevity of a product, durability, specific feature function sets, those types of things.
Got it. And so in terms of how, I mean, that's a lot to manage, right? You've got everything from the feedback coming back from your key customers that are in the field and providing that feedback into, okay, this worked, this didn't. How are you able to manage not only that, but then in terms of collecting that data? And, we talked before about this sort of idea of this, closed loop data collection, and also from the standpoint of your employees understanding the products from start to finish, because obviously if you have product developers working at Mystery Ranch, they need to have probably a bit more intimate knowledge, and your approach has been, hey, we want them to understand from start to finish, as opposed to like, this is just your area. So let's talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, well, we just have a good system set up, and again, I don't take any credit for it. I think Dana and Renee have really built this out from the beginning. I mean, Dana started building packs not because he wanted to design stuff, but he wanted to fix, what was wrong with what he was using at the time, and so he started sewing by repairing packs, and that's just kind of built into what we do now. I mean, we have a full repair department, and we meet with them monthly in order to get their data. So not only now are we kind of doing more on the front end in terms of validating things prior to them going into production, but we still have that closed loop system where, we're getting feedback from the repair team in terms of things that they're seeing, ways that we can improve what we're doing, and we're feeding that back into the product team. And so it's not just repair data. Now we're starting to collect a lot more data when it comes to defects during manufacturing, and as we get down into the weeds of the details of that, we're starting to kind of analyze trends and see, okay, cool, we're seeing lots of factories that are having issues producing this thing, or this is causing defects, and again, we're able to funnel that back into our prototyping process so that we can troubleshoot those issues, and reduce quality impacts on the brand. So that's kind of like the closed loop, and again, the other side of that too is at the outset, just that close connection to the customer and the ability to field test stuff with them, troubleshoot, all the potential failures that could come up, during, the actual lifespan of the product, and then working around those in order to kind of build pretty detailed spec packages for production. So yeah, I mean, when you think about it, it's gotten to be a pretty complex process. We have the same kind of challenges that any brand has when it comes to commercializing, and working with a global supply chain. But we're just trying to keep it, as close to kind of the original kind of idea as possible, which is that we just want to make stuff ourselves and see how it works and get it out there to people who need it.
Right. And so going a little bit deeper into, for example, tech packs, I know when we initially first started talking to you guys, you were already familiar with PLM. You had a PLM in place, but you had essentially outgrown that. and in terms of kind of trying to get away from still relying heavily on spreadsheets and having information in different areas, and being able to kind of bring those all into one place. One of the things that we've done since you guys came on board with Centric is we've expanded now to include vendor collaboration. And so as you mentioned, your tech packs can be quite extensive, some of them upwards of, let's say, over 30 pages, with all kinds of details. How has been the ability to work, especially in the midst of this disruption and the fact that we're dealing with these challenges in terms of travel? I think there's a lot of questions about like how is the future going to look? Obviously, no one's really been traveling at all for the past 3 months, and we anticipate that disruption is going to potentially continue on for maybe months to come, and maybe changing the way we do business as a whole. So there's pros and cons, obviously, on both sides of that. But I want to talk a little bit about how it's enabled you guys to keep those lines of communication open in working with your overseas factories, especially because I know we've also talked about, and I want you to touch on, is the fact that as you continue to scale, going from sort of that DIY, we're doing a lot of stuff in-house, or we have local factories that we are working with. When you start talking about a global basis for your supply chain and your vendors, obviously communication becomes key. So maybe you could touch on that.
Yeah, totally. I mean, there's the beauty of kind of our approach to product development is that by doing so much in-house up front, we typically don't, our development team doesn't travel as much as I've seen in other brands, and that's just because we're doing so much of the legwork ourselves that and then we're basically building these really, really detailed spec packages, which include the pattern set, a sewn construction sample, like even down to like photos of subassembly inspection comments, so that that's allowed us to, generally speaking, to travel less. But obviously, travel is still essential when it comes to, especially working with vendor partners and making sure that you're on the same page before you start production. So yeah, I mean, I think that it's been difficult for sure, but it's having the ability to consolidate all of that data and have it quickly accessible in the cloud definitely has helped a lot. We've been able to just communicate quicker and more efficiently, and have the ability to kind of like just send stuff out with a couple clicks, and use those digital tools to be able to convey the information that you want. So it definitely has made it for sure easier in this time. And I think, but particularly too, what we see in terms of like our overall travel spend, or in terms of like cost of goods sold, it's typically more dedicated towards quality for us. So rather than having the development team kind of park at a factory for a couple of weeks and get everything dialed out, we're doing that in-house, occasional development travel to work out some details. But where we invest that resource is into the kind of, I call it policing a little bit, but like just the monitoring of those outputs at the factory level. And so we have both a domestic and an international quality team who they're traveling all the time. And so with this pandemic, I think that's been the major boon for us, has been the ability to have those people who are local kind of communicating digitally and have like the right documentation and the right data to reference, so that travel isn't as necessary. And so we've been lucky, that I think we've had this system in place and built it up over the course of the last many years, in order to let the system kind of run itself and use the digital tools that we have at our disposal to communicate better and to shuffle as needed, without kind of the fear that we, by not having the ability to babysit stuff and travel places, that something could go wrong. I think we have a lot more faith now in both our process and our system that they're kind of like set up to enable us to weather these types of things. So yeah, I think that that's been awesome, and really we really have not been affected in terms of a quality standpoint, or really much of a production standpoint when it comes to this pandemic. That being said, though, like we have had some outages, factories go down, particularly overseas, and the ability of having that documentation and all that data kind of stored and ready at your disposal, we've been able to quickly shift things. So for example, like we had a factory go down for 2 months, which is going to affect some of our inventory positions on hunting packs for this fall. And so our ability to be able to quickly counter source those things and have another factory who's already in the system just get the data, build a prototype, we can issue a PO. The speed at which that occurred was really amazing, and I don't think we would have been able to do that a couple of years ago. Because a couple of years ago we were kind of working, we were basically building out binders of information, printed bombs, photos, all those things, and sending them physically, to different manufacturing plants. So yeah, like that takes a lot of time. And so we've been able to cut out that time pretty significantly just by having everything documented and accessible, like in Centric and in the cloud.
And would you say that, because obviously you do have the on-site or at least domestic production for your samples, do you think that that's had an impact as well on your samples? Are you still going overseas and having some of those samples, or at least beyond the proto, like more towards the end of the sample making process, is it coming from the vendor overseas and you're able to manage that more directly within the system?
Yeah, it's not 50% of our business is roughly 50% is still US made stuff too. So it's the ability to be able to have one system and one process, obviously with its own unique kind of tailored aspects when it comes to whether it's domestic or international and how we have to approach those. But yeah, it's our prototyping process is, as I said, it's happening all in-house first before we send it out. So really our process for kind of getting a factory up to speed on what they're building is more just like we send them a finished prototype that's fully vetted and spec'd out, and they're essentially just going to have to reproduce it, and then we just confirm that they can produce it to our specification. And as I said, that's why we invest more of that travel time on the quality side rather than on the development side. So yeah, I mean, nothing for us, whether domestic or international, like nothing's really changed in terms of the speed with which we can get those prototypes back, validate them, and move forward. So and again, that I think speaks to the systems that we've put in place in order to document and create better all-around transparency into what it is exactly that we're trying to produce, and how to go about producing it. And it at the end of the day, it's pretty simple, I guess, but it's also when you dig into all the information that goes into this, it's pretty complex as well. So yeah, we just try to maintain a level of detail that's flawless. That's kind of the standard that we hold ourselves to. It leaves Monsieur Ranch in a perfect state, and we expect it to kind of come back in a perfect state, and so that just requires a ton of communication.
And in terms of the actual, from a quality perspective, when you're talking about materials in particular, I'd be interested to know how you're working with either your vendors or just in-house in general, when you have, let's say, special forces or certain requirements as far as, let's say, fire, on being innovative on the side of the fabrics and the materials that you're putting into the packs, and continuing to stay sort of on the forefront of what is the latest and greatest out there in terms of materials and technology to apply to your packs? How does that happen?
Yeah, I think through testing, we discover a lot of interesting things, and really what comes out of that are more questions. And so we work really closely. We for a company that's kind of as broad in scope as we are in terms of who our end users are, we I'd say, we have a pretty complex supply chain. I'm not going to belittle that, but we do have, it's pretty tight. We really kind of try to focus on certain vendors who have good quality materials, but who also are interested in improving. And so through that, we're able to consolidate our volume pretty significantly, and then that is a vehicle to kind of also push, on our supply chain to help us solve new problems. And so, and that's obviously gotten better, I'd say, as we've grown. Obviously, like, volume speaks for itself. And but yeah, I think that, like, the more that we find partners who are committed to quality and who kind of are on the same page and interested in solving problems like we are, the more we kind of work closely with them to try to make suggestions about, what exactly we're looking for. And when it comes to fire, that's a great example, right? We're a little bit limited in terms of our material supply chain because everything has to test to an NFPA 1977 standard, which is basically we have to cook the packs. We have an oven in-house, and we cook the packs at 500 degrees for 15 minutes. And so in order to do that, in order to achieve that standard, everything pretty much has to be nylon 6/6. And so you have to kind of work. So when it comes down to, like, oh, well, let's create a new fire buckle, and we want to work with a material supplier in order to create that buckle, like, we have to kind of troubleshoot the challenges that exist with nylon 6/6 being more brittle than acetal, or some of the details that go into it, can get pretty nuanced and complex. And so again, I think it just boils down to, like, building solid relationships, and then we're pretty loyal customers to our material suppliers, and I think that just helps us build good relationships. And so then even when a project that it may be low volume, we typically have pretty good feedback and a willingness to kind of try something new, even when it's kind of known that it's not going to be a major revenue driver. I think that we're just able to buoy that with kind of some of the other volume that we can get in other areas.
Right, because they're probably looking just as much towards the innovation as you guys are, and even if it's a small output, it's innovating that much further, right?
Yeah, and I think we've seen recently too, just that and we have a pretty we're pretty open about with our material supply chain about what we're doing, and we're not trying to force them into, like, producing things that where we have an exclusivity or something. Basically, like, it's good stuff. If it's good stuff, like, consumers deserve to have it. And so whether they get it from Michigan Ranch or someone else, like, typically, we're just kind of open-minded about that, and letting them know that, like, okay, we might want a 6-month exclusivity just because we put a lot of work into this, but no, I think we're usually totally accepting of them being able to kind of produce this for other people. And that really, at the end of the day, just makes everybody's products better, right? Like, and so if we're not creating a better marketplace, for the consumer, then, we're not really doing our jobs. And so I think that that's important to think about.
Right. Yeah, and then so just in terms of, like, do you find yourself then doing any sort of collaborations or working with other, like, getting feedback from other either brands who make backpacks or are in a similar space? Is there some collaboration that goes on in terms of that?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, like, more so probably on the military side, like, we collaborate with people who do compete with us maybe a little bit. but yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, I think, on the hunting side is a great example. We have a good relationship with Sitka Gear. We license their OptiFade patterns. They make backpacks, we make backpacks, but they see value in what we're doing, and for their consumers. And so, yeah, I think at the end of the day, it's all about trying to get better gear out there for everyone. And so, yeah, we definitely do collaborate with other brands. We do a fair amount of SMUs, both with outdoor brands and kind of helping them kind of tailor what they're looking for on some of the IP that we own, and on the military side as well. So yeah, occasionally that does come up.
Cool. Okay. Well, I'm looking at just a couple of I noticed the question had come in. So it was, where do you get most of your ideas in building wildland firefighting packs? And have you produced packs and bags for law enforcement?
So yeah, like all that stuff comes straight from the customers. Like I said, we have just good connections in the wildland community. Like our fire sales manager was, prior to working at Mission Ranch, a hotshot for 30 years. And so he's got connections. I mean, he's actually on a fire right now. And so, and whether it's outdoor, hunting, or military, like our sales teams are divided so that they're focusing on one channel, and as a result, we get really good feedback from them. But also too, we just have a kind of core group in each specific product line. We have a core group of customers that we kind of rely on for feedback. And so, we do a lot of the market analysis and stuff that any brand would do when it comes to kind of validating, the ideas that we have. But we also have, as a privately held company, right, we have a little bit of a more wiggle room, I guess I'd say, when it comes to like not having the shackles of SKU productivity tied too deeply. So it just allows us to kind of throw a few things out there to see how they stick. And so, yeah, I think for fire, it's really kind of just working with those users and understanding, the products that we have now, how they're working, how they can be better, but also like, what product opportunities exist out there. And that's what's interesting about it too, is, we get to kind of watch the evolution of each of these different kind of markets. So fire, as an example, like the way people fight fire is changing. Unfortunately, there's more fire these days, and so, yeah, we're working on things right now where we realize that in 10 years, say for example, like drones are going to become an important part of fire surveillance and also firefighting. And so we've been kind of informed about that by some customers and kind of working on some different carry solutions for those things. Or yeah, it kind of goes, I can get super deep in the weeds on this stuff pretty quickly.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, it's interesting, and watching how different approaches change in time is something that we try to keep a close connection to. Military wise, like, medical stuff is an example, like the way that military medics carry gear is changing because the gear is changing. And so we just try to keep a pulse on that scene and on what's going on, and then kind of innovate from there.
And so kind of, bringing it back into that systems-based approach, obviously a lot of information when you talk about the future and you talk about how you're taking that feedback and starting to think about how you're going to plan for future products. How are you managing that from a data perspective?
Yeah, well, we've just taken kind of Centric's allowed us to take a pretty uniform approach, which is good because then the process is easily understandable from people internally as well as externally. So, like I said at the outset, the complexity of our business is probably most notably in the supply chain, because of the need to have both domestic and international supply chain both for materials and for construction. And so those are two totally different approaches. They're two different, and so we've just kind of built a process that works for both. But we also have to realize where they're different. And particularly, it's not just supply chain; it's also calendars. Like the calendars that we use for military and firefighting are very different from the calendars that we use for commercial product like hunting and outdoor stuff. So that's really kind of where we've built a kind of solid foundation of this is what a data package looks like that goes out to any factory, and it includes these 10 different kind of components. But Centric has allowed us to kind of get a little bit better visibility into the what and the how in terms of and the when, and how we processize that. So we're able to kind of do really quick turn. If a contract tender comes out for a military, we have a set process that we have to execute on in 30 days, and we have that kind of pre-established. And if a fire opportunity comes up that's more seasonal, we have the ability to kind of build a commercialization calendar that's on an 18-month kind of call it normal outdoor kind of development cycle. So that flexibility is awesome, and it's just allowed us to get a little bit more just better at working through these things, and also communicating not only with supply chain partners but also customers.
Awesome. Cool. Well, I know that we are sort of rounding down to getting close to the hour here, so I just wanted to check in and kind of see what other questions that we have so far, just so we can make sure that we answer those. So let's see here. I think we covered that, talking about calendars. And then from working from that, going back to, let's see, regarding the technical materials of the product, again, going back to that, do you take a position on those materials, and how do you manage keeping track of all of the vast amounts of materials that you're using?
Yeah, good question. So we do for domestic stuff, we do take positions on materials because we're doing CMT. So we have in-house manufacturing, which we've really recently kind of dedicated more towards kind of low rate initial production for kind of field test trials. So 20, 30 units of something, we'll build up to 100, whether to fill an inventory or take a specific order. But we outsource the majority of the larger volume production for domestic stuff. So as a result, we do take inventory positions on materials because we're supplying those materials, and we're just kind of having those factories do cut, make, trim. So when then overseas, it's fairly standard where it's an FOB relationship, and so managing that data is also pretty complicated. And but again, I think with Centric, we've been able to build a good digital material library that houses the testing information, that also houses all of the supply information, prices, et cetera, et cetera. And so yeah, that just allows us to kind of have really quick access to everything that's been qualified and approved.
Awesome.
And then I see a question here about consumer feedback. That's something that we're looking forward to. That's been done in a very ad hoc way, and just kind of like lots of Word docs and stuff like that we're now kind of storing in the system that's and tied to like a style record in Centric. But we're looking forward to, Centric has a field test app, which basically allows users to use their mobile device to record and take photos, and then it'll upload it back into the system. So we're looking forward to getting that put in place in order to kind of continue down the path of having everything stored in one place, so that the whole team can access it. We can look back on it too if we see, if an issue does come up post development, we can kind of look back on what the field test information was and the feedback on the product was. And so that's something we're looking forward to.
Awesome. Well, I'm excited for, where I know we've had a lot of conversations about different areas to explore in the future, and we'll definitely be looking forward to having you guys get that field testing app in place and getting that feedback and being able to apply it back into your process. So if there aren't any more questions, let's see, I think we're good. So I just want to, wrap up by, first off, thank you, Luke, for taking the time out today to talk to our audience about the quality issue. And of course, if you guys have any questions, my information is right here. You're more than welcome to email me and field any questions that you have for Luke. Luke is also on LinkedIn. And so basically on behalf of Centric Software, I just want to thank you, Luke, and Mystery Ranch for speaking with me today. And also thank you to Outdoor Industry Association for generously hosting us, and also for your timeless commitment to the outdoors and the spaces that we love, and all of the brands, retailers, and entrepreneurs that you guys represent. So if there's nothing else, thanks again, and we look forward to hearing from you guys. Take care.
Thanks, Colleen.
Yep, thanks, Luke. Bye-bye.